to the Free Assange Vigil Day 5, 6. Have we been here for a month? I can't tell anymore. We are live in Washington, D.C. We have 2 more days of actions and events planned. We're going to be in front of the Capitol building and the Supreme Court today. Tomorrow, we will be back in front of the White House, the Trump Hotel, and the Department of Justice. We are going to be at a taping of Redacted tonight this evening. We're going to turn up in front of the trial for the Embassy Protector Collective 4 tomorrow morning. We're not stopping. Like, we've slept like 6 hours this entire time, and if we're 22 to 24 hours. We're fucking going. And we are joined today by our good friend Tariq Haddad. Tariq is live in London. He has been inside the courtroom this entire week covering the extradition hearing, which wrapped today a little bit unexpectedly. So we can't wait to get a live update from London. So without further ado, Tariq Haddad, how's it going? And please learn us some stuff, buddy.
Yeah, nice to see you guys. Yeah, it's been a kind of a bit of a hectic week. Obviously, as you guys are all aware, and some of your viewers will be aware, we've been trying to kind of do this media organization in the midst of this kind of crazy trial, just to try and get some half-decent press coverage from the hearings. So we've been doing news reports and kind of trying to do video updates, but in the hearing itself, it was yeah, a lot of things happening every single day. You know, you could have, you know, I was trying to write a news story every single day. There was probably, you know, 3 or 4 different stories that you could have written from each day. But the positive thing is actually that the world's media was there. You know, it wasn't like it wasn't covered. The stories that might have come out might have not been what people had always hoped for, because, you know, there's always the problems of the media that people are aware of. But I mean, we had on the first day, there was at least 100 and something journalists there, like press journalists inside the room. So we had like 30 people in the actual courtroom and about 60 in like a side annex, which you could see everything by telelink. That kind of died down in the week, but consistently there was, you know, at least 30, 40 journalists there reporting on it, which, I mean, you wouldn't expect anything less, but it was good that they were there. And, you know, despite all, you know, all of our criticisms about the media, I got to actually meet a lot of people that worked for these kind of bigger organizations that I'd never really come across before. And it is kind of reminds me of that mentality that I had when I was talking to you guys at the beginning of the day of when I first resigned from Newsweek, is that, you know, these people aren't like evil monsters, you know, plotting to kind of overthrow or like, you know, keep Assange in prison or that kind of thing. I think what it more is actually just the background that these people come from, and, you know, the organizations that they're in, they kind of tend to have these kind of groupthink mentalities, and they, you know, they think they're doing a good job, but it's just like people get herded in these directions and there's pressure to think a specific way. But
I think people talk about becoming institutionalized through being in prison or being in a mental facility or being part of like even the public school education program. But they don't follow that to its conclusion, that you can become institutionalized in a professional aspect to think and react in a way that is consistent and predictable with the underlying narrative and agenda of that particular institution.
Yeah, it's more of a systemic problem, right? And I think, you know, everyone kind of humans like their routine and they want to fit in and stuff, and they want to keep their job security. So, you know, they start to think how they're supposed to keep their job. But the positive side of that is that, you know, I spoke to several journalists just in the week. You know, we have coffee breaks and lunch breaks and stuff. We have a cafeteria, kind of like going back to school. But, you know, I had plenty of conversations with people. And first of all, like, everyone there was supportive of Assange, maybe, you know, not as kind of like hardcore as the sort of activist support, but everyone did see the importance of this case. And I also just had a lot of conversations where I could educate people, because I think certain people might have not followed the story that closely. You know, they were just kind of asked, okay, this court hearing is now, you need to go and cover this. So it's like I had a lot of good conversation with people where I was able to give them like little facts and stuff about some of the details of the case, and that kind of illuminated them, and I hope it will kind of encourage them to kind of do a bit of extra digging themselves.
Could you give us a little bit of an update of the news that came out today? Like, what was it that came out in the trial today? Because they did end up concluding it early, correct?
Yeah, so today, do you want me to do a summary of the whole week or specifically today?
Just specifically today, we'll do that one right now.
Sure. So today we kind of had the prosecution finishing up their arguments from yesterday. So yesterday and the kind of first half today was a lot of legal wrangling about whether espionage or is a political offense, or whether we even should be talking about political offense exceptions. So it's fairly complicated, but I'll try and kind of summarize it as best as I can. We have between the United States and the United Kingdom, we have the extradition treaty. So in the extradition treaty, there is a specific Article 4 of the treaty has specific protections for political crimes. But in the legislation, we also have, it's the same year in 2003, and the legislation, there is no mention of political exceptions for political crimes. So what the prosecution was trying to argue was saying that the treaty doesn't, that exception in the treaty is not what applies, and we should be just looking at the UK law. And obviously that's convenient for their side of the argument. The defense was trying to say, the treaty is how you are trying to extradite Assange. You cannot use this treaty to extradite him on one hand, and then on the other hand say that this treaty doesn't apply because the UK law is different. Unfortunately, and I kind of realized this the most today, the criticisms of the judge were very valid in my opinion. I think in the earlier parts of the week, I was trying to kind of have an open mind that, you know, the judge might appreciate the seriousness of this case and she's going to listen to the facts. And I think, you know, she did for the most part. Today, it was very clear to me that, you know, the judge did not seem to be willing to be helpful in this case, and that's will lead to the second part of what came out today. The second part of today was the lawyers were arguing to have Julian Assange sit in next to his lawyers, and I think that came out a little bit yesterday. We got a lot more information about that today. So I don't know if you guys read about it. I'm sure you did. Kind of Assange had this moment where he stood up in court and he said, you know, I've been spied on enough. And you guys are all familiar with this, right? I'm assuming?
Yeah, yes.
Okay, perfect. I don't have to. Yeah. So we got into that today. At first, in the beginning, first part of the morning, the court staff offered to give him a set of headphones that might help him kind of listen better, but I think Julian gave up on that, and it didn't really address his specific concerns. Was, you know, having private confidential conversations with his lawyers that he can advise them and, you know, steer them in certain directions where necessary, which is kind of what is expected.
No, it's like if you're, you know, in the desert and dying of thirst and someone's like, oh, okay, I would like to relieve your thirst. Here's hot coffee and booze.
Yeah.
I mean, really, these court proceedings are happening around him. He is not actively participating. And I know the judge has told him he needs to communicate through his lawyers, but he can't even talk to his lawyers to convey anything to the court because he's isolated away from them.
Yeah, I mean, so he's at the moment he's been kind of whispering through, or like through a slab in the glass and passing notes through there, and he's kind of been attracting attention where he can. But the problem has been is that, so obviously there is the back row. There's actually officials from the United States that are sitting there. Interestingly, the official that actually accidentally leaked the fact that Julian Assange is going to be prosecuted was there. I don't know if you guys remember that story. Some guy accidentally copied and pasted the charges into another indictment. So he was there.
Interesting to know that that guy is present, who accidentally revealed it, is actually in the courtroom.
Yeah, so I think he's the assistant district attorney of Virginia. So he was there, and there's undoubtedly a few others from the United States there. And interestingly, so yeah, we had this application made and the arguments made by Assange's lawyers to bring him out. What was interesting is that the prosecution said we don't have any problems with this. I think it might have been a little bit of a charade, but what was revealing is that we had this like hour and a half of arguing about everything, and like the defense making their case of why Assange should be brought forward. And then the judge kind of listened to all that, and then she gave her response, but it was read out from a piece of paper. She had it ready before she'd heard everything. And I was actually speaking to Barry Pollack outside the courtroom, who's his US attorney. He said, you know, in the US, he's experienced this a few times. And he's like, why do they bother? But he said, you know, this does happen a lot, unfortunately. But the decision had already been made before, you know, which is
and I think that's an important theme too in this entire case, because you have the information come out from Cassandra Fairbanks that revealed the order to imprison Julian in the way that it came from the ambassador to Germany at the time, and from the direction and order of the President of the United States.
And that's made very clear in the audio that Cassandra released, but it was also made even more clear when we got a chance to sit down and talk to her last night. We got a lot more information about the origins of that call from her, and a lot more background detail on her relationship with both Andrew Schwartz and Rick Canal. And by the way, there's a clean copy of that audio now. We're going to get it out today. And Tarek, that's not like 12 or 15 minutes.
Can someone send me that, please?
You want to watch.
Yeah, because I've been so busy. I've heard like her name being mentioned, but I have no idea what's happened with any of that. So that'd be really.
It's fascinating. You're gonna.
I've heard a little bit about the Kim.com and Rohrbacher thing, and I think it's connected possibly.
Yeah.
Well, she wouldn't comment on the Kim.com thing.
Okay, well,
because of how connected it is.
Right. There's a lot there. I think there's a lot more that's going to be coming out. These things were actually leaked out as they were arguing to be part of the defense for Julian, and were leaked out this week. But as you were saying, with the judge already having an opinion written up and ready to go, we saw this even earlier in 2019 when Julian was up for the bail charge and trying to explain the situation with the asylum, why he skipped bail. And it seemed even in that situation, the judge, it didn't matter what the defense said, the judge already was ready to give a sentence. And you know, this seems to be a common thread with all these different hearings in the UK and the case management hearings and now the extradition hearing, that it no matter what the defense tries to present, there's just a roadblock of there's already a predetermined decision. And ultimately, do you feel like this is how, no matter how many witnesses or what evidence is presented by the defense in May and June, do you feel like there's already going to be a decision just waiting till the end and just to read it off?
I mean, I don't want to be that deterministic just yet, because I think my philosophy is that, like, if you treat people a certain way, they will actually act that way, you know? Like, if I go and think that someone's a bad person, they'll kind of be hostile to me naturally. So I think the best approach, even though I don't disagree with what you're saying at all, I think the philosophy I want to take is that, like, it's up to the press and the activists and everyone covering this to put as much pressure on these people and educate them as much as possible. And then that's the only way to do it. And then I think if that decision comes, then we have to address that. And I don't think it does us any good to be like, she's already made up her mind, screw her, and just kind of throw up our arms in anger. I think we just keep covering this as professionally as possible. We keep making our arguments, trying to get more senior people involved.
It really comes down to accountability and transparency.
Yeah.
And as long as those things the public can see, it doesn't matter how political the judge is. If they put the evidence out there, that is what the case should be determined as. And in this case, it is wholly political. And any other decision from that literally just shows all of our national institutions have failed us.
Yeah. And just to put some of this into a little bit of context too, we had, I don't know if you guys are aware of someone called Tommy Robinson.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so he was, just for people who might not be, he was the head of the English Defence League, this far-right group in the UK. He assaulted a police officer and served 1 year in prison. At his trial, he was allowed to sit next to his judges,
Exactly.
even though that was a violent offence. Julian has never committed a violent crime. So that's interesting context.
Yeah, and that just shows the way that the system works when they want it to work in a particular way. That it is designed to be as invasive and intrusive as possible when the people in power want it to.
Yeah.
Has there been any more information that came out about Julian's treatment between court cases? Because I know the one day he was strip searched multiple times, handcuffed a whole lot, cell searched, moved from holding cell to holding cell. Was there anything like that that came out additionally at any point during the week?
Not particularly, no. Yeah, unfortunately, I can't give any other information. But some of the days I got to be able to sit in actually in the courtroom where I was fairly close to him, and so I was kind of keeping an eye on him. I mean, some days you could tell he looks a bit kind of dopey and like a little bit tired. Some other days, a little bit better. I think it's a difficult situation for him, of course. It's very difficult to say the amount of stuff that he's going through, but I'm sure it's very difficult right now.
Well, Tarek, we have to bounce. We're getting ready to go to the Capitol building and the Supreme Court. You have a live show that's gonna start here shortly. Will you please tell the folks who are watching the stream who you're going to be having on soon and how they can watch that?
That's great. Thank you so much. Well, today, I think it's going to be our last day of doing this, but fortunately, we've got some very great guests. We're going to have the editor of WikiLeaks at the moment, Christensen, and the WikiLeaks ambassador, Joseph Farrell. They can only join us for about an hour or so, so we're going to do that for an hour and take a little break. And then after that, we're going to have Craig Murray, who's got a close relationship with Julian Assange and WikiLeaks, the former UK ambassador to Uzbekistan. And I'm going to not remember his name, but we do have a official, he was the former ambassador to Ecuador as well. So a couple of ambassadors. So that's not a bad way to end the week. And hopefully we'll have some interesting discussions there. And hopefully we'll send that out to everyone. That's going to be at the Watchdog's Twitter, which is I always forget my own Twitter handle because I just made it. It's anyone
We'll
remind
tweet it
me?
out for you.
Yeah, we're gonna
it's been such a long week. I think it's it's WD Newswire. WD Newswire. There we go. Okay.
Well, thank you very much for joining us, Eric. We will connect back with you soon.
Yeah, good luck, guys.